What does mitochondrial health have in common with ascension or cancer?
Some people look at the top: tyrosine, phenylalanine, T3, L-dopa, melanin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. And what you're going to begin to realize from Northern's theorem, not only does that pathway work left to right, it works right to left. We're using the light outside to create the light inside. I said, now you're beginning to understand what Northern's theorem is all about.
The ascension process has all the hallmarks of a perfectly optimized mitochondrial health. We have inner illumination, bliss, heat energy, or what some of the scriptures term as the fire of purification. The research that is contained in this video demonstrates this conclusion. It's going to take some time before we have the means to re-educate and quantify good mitochondrial health for the general public's purpose. In the meantime, I'm convinced that quantum chemistry between light, water, and the generation of energy current are the three pillars of optimizing our full potential and establishing a baseline for perfect health in which cancer simply cannot exist. Cancer needs an anaerobic, low pH, poor state of health in order to survive. The secret matrix is creating a balanced environment inside and outside of our physiology so that nature can do the rest. I mean, after all, we all have an organic machine that is self-generating. I mean, it's that simple. Take 12 minutes and watch this video, and you tell me in the comments, and we'll compare notes.
It goes back to Faraday's experiments in the 1850s. Basically, the FO head spins. You got electric current coming through. That induces electric and magnetic fields. So because the inner mitochondrial membrane is only 6 microns, that means the charge differential between them is 30 million volts. So realize that you have a lightning bolt present in every single crista of your mitochondrial membrane. So that tells you about power, okay? The other crazy thing about the electromagnetic force is that it gets stronger as scale shrinks. So for example, the electromagnetic force in the sun is not as great as it is in your mitochondria. Let me say that again because people will not believe what I just said. But it's absolutely the truth. As scale shrinks, the electromagnetic force, the force carrier of that force is the photon, becomes stronger. So when you think about what I've said about melanin, what I've said about wideband semiconduction, that we're able to make light stronger than the sun, and it's inside us. And I just told you about scale. You start going, wait a minute, now I know where Jack's going with longevity. It turns out who's ever got the best mitochondrial redox wins the game of longevity. That's exactly what I've been saying for 20 years.
There is no solid evidence that shows natural sunlight causes cancer or bad eyesight. So how is it that we all got it in our heads that sunlight is bad for our health or bad for our eyes, especially when there's so much evidence to show otherwise?
So, okay then, why does the sun damage our skin and give us skin cancer and melanoma if the sun's so good for us? Alexis, answer me that, my friend.
I'm glad you asked. Because if you actually look at the literature, I have a pinned post on my Instagram because so many people ask me this freaking question. And I'm like, just go look at my post because there's like 10 articles. Our bodies are naturally supposed to make an abundance of alpha MSH as well as the beta and gamma in response to UV light. But there's been this demonization campaign that's been going on for decades about like stay out of the sun, slip, slop, slop in the sunscreen and wear your sunglasses. And the ophthalmologists and the dermatologists are like, you know, if you go in UV light without protection, you're a dumbass, essentially. And it just couldn't be farther from the truth from just like a very basic, like we have the science to support it.
In comparing life today before the 19th century, life has gotten, well, I would say too comfortable from the standpoint of physical comfort. For many people, there's little need to even leave the cave of their living room. Work at home, Amazon deliveries, entertainment, social media, this is all an unprecedented evolutionary change to that in which we have evolved from.
Chronic Neolithic disease until recently, like literally the 1900s.
Mhm.
Even in the early 1900s, Jack talks about all the time, like certain cancer cases, lung cancers and other types of cancers were like so rare.
It's much more likely to develop cancer if you're seriously deficient in sunlight because you live and work indoors year after year. In this video, we're going to take a deep look into this topic.
In addition to that, we also see that people who work outdoor occupations have lower levels of melanoma than people who work indoor occupations. We also see that people who have chronic, regular, daily sun exposure have lower levels of melanoma incidence and severity than people who avoid the sun altogether. The problem, as emphasized in the literature, is really intermittent sun exposure, which is when you never go outside and then you go on vacation to the Bahamas, you blast yourself for 3 days, you get burned to a crisp. That's a problem. But when you're getting daily sun exposure and you're chronically building that solar callus, as Jack would say, you're not only, giving yourself all these other benefits, you're also protecting yourself against melanoma. And not to mention that, there's no discussion of risk-benefit analysis in this sun, let's say the mainstream propaganda around the sun.
I recommend people lose the clothing and take 20 minutes a day for some deep sunbathing. Allow the sun to penetrate deep into the mitochondrial anatomy of the heart, chest, lungs, the lymphatic system. This is the best balance for modern life. That is moved way off the reservation of circadian biology. If you like exercising or yoga, lose the yoga mats and gym shoes and work on the grass under the sun. Be very careful not to overexpose yourself for all those that are coming out of the cave with a rare occasion.
But also, if you're going out in the sun, you're protecting yourself against cardiovascular disease, other cancer types, breast, colon, prostate, blood cancers. You're protecting yourself against neurodegeneration, Parkinson's disease, dementia in general. And so if we look at the whole picture, it becomes really clear, okay, their number one killer is essentially cardiovascular disease and neurodegeneration not too far behind.
Right.
Those two diseases are literally completely protected against in the context of chronic regular sun exposure. The rates are dramatically lower among people who engage in those practices. Wow. But nobody talks about that.
The general ignorance we have in the true principles of mitochondrial health, makes it challenging for optimizing mitochondrial health. Principles like temperature swings, sun exposure, physical work, staying grounded to the earth, and time spent under the green canopies of the trees, including time spent with our four-legged companions, is considered irrelevant.
Near-infrared light is actually an essential nutrient for the human body. It's not just superfluous. Our mitochondria actually require it.
It makes so much sense on the quantum level. Our bodies would be constructed and nourished by light, water, and magnetism would certainly be present. This is exactly how nature would design it.
Mitochondrial dysfunction is at the root of cancer, but he's not getting the next step, which is what drives mitochondrial health. Even if you're sitting in the shade outside, green plants reflect a ton of near-infrared light. And it penetrates, and it penetrates into your body all the way through. If you're standing outside and it's reflecting off the green plants from all directions, it is going into every organ and tissue and it's stimulating your mitochondria.
What about if it's overcast like it was this morning?
Even if it's overcast.
Really?
And how our bodies are light-making machines. They're also light-sensing machines. And depending on what light is coming in and going out is dictating the health of the system. So we know, for example, if you get cold really stimulates mitochondria because you want to make essentially more heat.
The research on natural sunlight and mitochondrial biology is gaining significant momentum. Think of sunlight as containing the entire rainbow of colors, different frequencies of light. It's more than a multivitamin. It creates a very special type of water that is able to truly hydrate the cells. Drinking water doesn't necessarily hydrate cellular plasma.
We're told that the cytoplasm is just like liquid water, just like this. But you can see from the cytoplasm that it's a gel. And that gel is essentially what we've discovered. We call easy water or fourth phase water. A friend who's a surgeon, and she tells me that, deep in the abdomen, you cut through a muscle, and you'd expect that the water, which in theory is inside the cell, should come pouring out, but it doesn't, never comes pouring out. I learned about it from a guy named Gilbert Ling, who passed about 5 years ago. Gilbert came from China.
Melanin also is a really important bioenergetic molecule where it can split neighboring water molecules. When sunlight strikes melanin, it can split water into free electrons, molecular oxygen, and molecular hydrogen. The molecular hydrogen and oxygen can go and power mitochondria. The electrons, of course, also power mitochondria via the electron transport chain.
We can put electrodes in the easy water, one electrode in the negative, one electrode in the positive, and we can get actual electrical current that comes out. We have proof of principle. That's what creates a battery.
Yeah, the water battery.
The water battery.
Which is what allows the battery to work. So if you look at a mitochondria, it's literally a battery. It separates negative charge from positive charge. So positive protons go into the intramembrane space, and then they basically go back into the inner matrix in complex 5. It's literally a rotor that spins as the protons come through.
Everybody has been studying genetic causes of cancer. But if you have very little easy water, cells divide rampantly. It's been demonstrated that you have low electrical potential, small electrical potential. You have, because it's the negative charge of the easy water that builds the electrical potential in the cell. So I wrote a paper about cancer, and it seems to be attracting some attention. And I think there's a fair chance that the answer does lie in the dearth or absence of very much easy water.
Now, you had mentioned that infrared radiation seems to be the wavelength that structures water, particularly infrared from the sun. I was curious if you could give a little bit more information as to which wavelengths actually grow.
The infrared not only builds EZ, but it also builds the charge, because without the charge, you have no EZ.
Okay, so they go together.
Yeah, the charge can be amplified by ultraviolet.
Now, the mainstream dermatologist will tell you that there's no such thing as a healthy tan, which is insane, because if you learn about the functions of melanin, outside of everything I just said, melanin is also a really potent heavy metal chelator, can pull heavy metals out of the bloodstream. So melanin ties in with the story, of course, about cancer, because if we're thinking about cancer, we're thinking about mitochondrial dysfunction, which is creating more reactive nitrogen and oxygen species that are leaking out into the environment. If you want to build your internal melanin, like we have melanin deep in our brain, in the locus coeruleus and the substantia nigra. The substantia nigra is the part of the brain that becomes degraded in Parkinson's disease. It loses melanin over time, and melanin and dopamine, you might know that dopamine is like a defective in the Parkinson's disease, but melanin and dopamine are very tightly linked, where they both share the same precursor, tyrosine, which is an amino acid. And so what the body can essentially do is, if dopamine is, let's say, running low, it can break down melanin to make L-dopa and then shunt it into dopamine production. And melanin can be broken down also if there's a very oxidative environment. So if it's like you're under a lot of inflammatory stress, you're in, let's say, a poor light environment 24/7, you're eating bad foods, you're not moving your body, it creates a very reactive and oxidative environment that melanin can actually help to sequester some of those reactive species, but it's at a cost, because if you don't get out of that environment, now the melanin is actually being like terminally degraded and you're losing those sheets.
There's some big problem in the cardiovascular system, and that is you got to get the red blood cells to pass through the capillaries, and the capillaries are, most of them, are half the diameter of the red blood cell. Well, nature has to exert a bit of energy to push those red blood cells through the capillaries. And you could see them in videos. I have a video. You can see that the red blood cells are squeezed this way. The vessels are actually helping to drive the flow. We found that experimentally. The infrared energy, which is building the easy water, is supplying and separating charge is applying the energy force.